Hi, I'm Kim Sealing-Smith of Ignite Global. If you've seen me speak, you know how passionate I am about teaching hiring managers to interview well, something very few do, unfortunately. Hudson, the recruiting firm, recently released a study that said that 44% of the managers they surveyed rated their last hire as not good. Now, on one hand, I find this astounding, but on the other, hardly surprising. Learning to interview is one of the most fundamentally important things that you can do as a manager. Yet most managers don't take the time to learn, relying instead on gut feel, and resulting in situations where you interview Dr. Jekyll and have Mr. Hyde walk through the door their first day of work. Now, I can't share our entire hiring skills workshop with you in this short video, but what I can do is share my top tip for conducting a great interview and 3 of the most common pitfalls we see and how to avoid them. My top tip: plan and conduct properly structured behavioral-based interviews. I know. That doesn't sound very revolutionary, does it? But I say properly structured because, quite frankly, even those managers who think they do behavioral-based interviewing well sometimes don't. Let me explain. Look at this graphic. It's meant to represent the stock market. Why do I use a graphic of the stock market to describe behavioral-based interviewing? Because if you've ever bought a share of stock or a financial instrument of any sort, you know that at the back of their flash marketing material, they usually put a disclaimer, something that says, past performance is not indicative of future results. Well, guess what? In interviewing, past performance is the only thing that's indicative of future results. You want to test for behaviors or competencies in the interview process. Therefore, it's not about what the candidate would do. It's about what they did do, what they've done in the past. The candidates themselves have typically done quite a bit of preparation for the interview. They know how to answer your questions to make themselves look good. And they want to tell you what they think you want to hear, what you'd like them to do on the job. But even if they know what should be done, it doesn't mean that that's what they'll do when they're actually in the workplace. Everyone knows that the modern workplace is meant to be collaborative, at least in most companies. But are all staff members collaborative? No, they're not, but they know that's the right answer, so they'll tell you all day long that they are. Structuring behavioral-based interview questions properly is not hard. They usually start with some version of, tell me about a time when, or give me an example of. So what's hard about that? Absolutely nothing, which leads me to my 3 most common pitfalls. It amazes me how many hiring managers know how to structure these questions, yet on the day they end up asking things like, how would you? Or even worse, they say things like, well, if this happened, you would, and they fill in the blank of the behavior that they're looking for, and end up with something like, wouldn't you? If you think I'm exaggerating, just listen to yourself or others the next time you're interviewing a candidate. After having sat in on hundreds of interviews with hiring managers, I can tell you this happens much more than you might think. So how do you avoid this? By planning your questions in advance and potentially even taking them into the interview with you so that you remember how you actually structured them. The second most common pitfall that we see is to tell the candidate exactly what you're looking for. Like one of the recent participants in our hiring skills workshop, we challenged our participants to come up with different words to describe the behavior that they're testing for. For instance, if you're looking for someone who's persistent, you wouldn't want to ask, tell me about a time when you had to be persistent. You might say, tell me about a time when you had to complete a project and you were faced with obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. Now, this participant did a great job with the first part. He simply said, could you give me an example of a time when you had to complete a project and you got stuck? I loved it. But then he let himself down when he added, and did you go for help? We all laughed, as he did, when he realized that he was holding up a sign to the candidate saying, I'm looking for someone who will ask for help if they don't know what to do next. So don't seed your answers into the questions that you're asking. And the third most common pitfall is to not hold the candidate's feet to the fire. In other words, you might ask them a great question such as, tell me about a time when you had a run-in with a coworker, but they probably won't want to talk about an event that puts them in a bad light. So they'll give you hypothetical examples of how they would proactively avoid just such a situation. And you let them get away with it. but you want them to give you specific, verifiable events with enough detail that you could reference check if you wanted to. Now, this is your litmus test. If you had enough detail so that you could pick up the phone and verify that that event actually happened and what the candidate's part in that event was, you know that you have specific examples of what the candidate actually did on the job. You also have an added level of comfort that they're telling the truth. Because when most people lie, they tend to lie in generalities, not specifics. So remember, the devil is in the detail. The next time you get ready to interview, imagine a little 6-inch devil named Kim sitting on your left shoulder and whispering in your ear. Can you reference check that? If you don't have enough detail to do so, you know you need to drill deeper. If all you do is plan your interviews in advance using properly structured behavioral-based interviewing questions, and then avoid seeding the answer that you want to hear into the question, and truly hold the candidate's feet to the fire until they give you enough detail that you can rely on as an indication of their past behavior, then I guarantee that your interviews will be exponentially better than most of your peers. Happy hiring!